Welcome back to Mental Wellness Evolution. I'm Jeff. Thanks for being here. So today's talk, we're going to go over self-awareness, okay, and how to become more self-aware within ourselves, okay? I always say that self-awareness is the key to unlocking the door to change, because it absolutely is. We can't change anything within ourselves until we are aware that it has become an issue for us, okay? So we need to start digging and diving into ourselves just a little bit to try to figure out kind of who we are, why we are the way we are, why we're stuck in specific patterns, why we keep going back to the same types of things over and over and over again. And once we have this understanding, then we can facilitate plans, start making action steps, and ultimately move ourselves towards the goal of a more fulfilling life. So it's easy to just start on a surface level with some of the things that we know we need to change within ourselves. Sometimes those things are very obvious. They might be, you're drinking too much, or you're partying too much, or, your spending habits are terrible, or, you're eating terribly and you're gaining weight or anything like that. And a lot of those are like surface level things that are very easy to see within our awareness, okay? But we want to dive a little bit deeper. We want to kind of get into some of those habits and those patterns and those things that are maybe just lurking beneath the surface of our subconscious mind, okay? Now, the conscious mind is the present mind. That's the awareness that you're in the moment, you're here, you're in the now, you're paying attention, okay? The subconscious mind is subconscious, meaning below conscious awareness, meaning these might be some things that we're not necessarily aware that we're doing, okay? It might just be right just below our conscious awareness. So the great Carl Jung, who's one of my absolute favorites, always said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will govern our lives, and we will call it fate. And this is important to understand, guys, because 95% of our behaviors, our belief systems, our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions are operating subconsciously throughout our everyday lives. So we need to do a deeper dive into ourselves to start to gain an awareness of some of these things that might just be what we're consciously seeing within ourselves. So the first tip that we want to go through, guys, the first thing you want to do that's going to help you so much as you go about this process is to get yourself a journal. To me, a journal is one of the best tools that we can possess in our toolkits. It's something that I feel like everybody should be utilizing on a day-to-day basis for a variety of reasons. But for this specific reason, it allows us to track our patterns. It allows us to write down, which thoughts got me stuck today. And we can do that over an extended period of time. Which behavior am I stuck on? The thing that I keep doing over and over and over again. And as we get down the road a little bit, we can kind of start going back through our journal, look at me like, okay, here seems to be a pattern. Here seems to be a place that I'm getting stuck. Here seems to be something that I need to really focus on and worry about. Here's, I'm very reactive in this situation. Whatever that may be for you, we can track this with the journal, and then we can go back and have a look at it, okay? So this goes hand in hand with reflection and introspection. So reflection is a great thing to do at the end of every single day. We can kind of go back, look at where we got stuck. Maybe you got triggered very, very emotionally in a certain specific situation, and that happens and it comes up over and over and over again. With daily reflection, we'll be able to track that pattern. We'll be able to see that, hey, this is kind of one of those things that's triggering me over. Maybe it's something your partner does, or when you're with your children, or just something at work, or whatever it is. We start to be able to see that, oh, hey, this is causing me an issue. This seems to be taking me off course every single day. And that allows you the space to start action planning for what you're going to do when this thing comes up again in your life. Hey, when I get into that thing with my partner, instead of reacting subconsciously, I'm going to actually choose to go in a different direction. This also allows us a little bit of introspection where we kind of just look at ourselves. We can take a look at the end of the day, kind of like, how did I do today? Where did I get stuck? What is keeping me kind of moving forward in the direction that I would like to go? And we can see this as we do it throughout a day-to-day basis, okay? If you do this every day, you're going to find a lot of tremendous insights into yourself. You're going to start to shine a light on some of the things that you maybe weren't necessarily aware that you were doing. So just spend some time and thought at the end of the day, every day, just a little bit of time. You don't have to invest tons of time into this, guys. Usually 5-10 minutes is usually enough for you to kind of get a window into some of those habits and behaviors and those things that are kind of keeping you stuck in the same place over and over throughout the course of your days. The second thing that we want to do is we want to start paying attention to what triggers us, what generates very, very emotional reactions within us, okay? This gives us a great window into ourselves and who we become in the moment when we're activated. Instead of diving into that thing that triggered us and activated, we learn to give it a little bit of space, and we can kind of maybe dig a little bit deeper of what's going on here. Why am I reacting this way to this same circumstance over and over again? What is within me that gets so bothered by this? Maybe you see somebody online that says something and it constantly gets you, and you're, why is this triggering to me? What is going on inside of myself? What belief do I have within myself that's triggering this emotional activation within myself? And in many ways, guys, our triggers start to become our greatest teacher. They show us where we need to start going to do a little bit of work on ourselves. Because when we get triggered and activated, we check out of the conscious moment, we go inside of our heads, we get lost in our thought processes, and then we get stuck in thought, feeling, emotion loops, and we run around in circles over and over and over again. But it was one triggering event that activated that sequence. And if we can figure out what that trigger is and what the root of that trigger is, that allows us to give it a little bit of space the next time it shows up inside of our lives. And we can decide at that point whether we would like to go down the road of being activated by this or separate ourselves from it. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to feel the emotion inside of yourself, but you recognize what it is and you take that space back and you allow yourself to observe the emotion without getting your thought processes caught up inside of it. These are also a great thing to track inside your journal, okay, guys? Again, this allows us to develop a plan for how we'd like to show up when that shows up again in our lives moving forward, okay? When we're aware of our triggers, when we can go into them with a plan for what we're going to do, we're going to set ourselves up for a better chance of success. Because when the stress response gets activated, guys, we don't think properly. We just start reacting. We get very reactive. We're very outside of ourselves. But when we're aware that we have something in ourselves that's going to get triggered in certain and specific situations, and we already have a predetermined plan, at that point it becomes, I need to go to my plan, as opposed to just being very reactive, which is what the subconscious mind will do. It will take you back to the reaction and you dealing with that in the way that you've always dealt with it, okay? Another great practice for doing this, for gaining self-awareness, guys, is called shadow work, okay? Now, this was a concept that was brought forth by, again, the great Carl Jung, and that it's basically the shadow is kind of all the things about ourselves that are hiding in the darkness, if you will. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean all bad things, okay, guys, but there's a lot of our negative or things that we like to repress about ourselves that we don't like to show to the world, or maybe even admit to ourselves that we are, is kind of that part of the shadow. There's also good aspects of ourselves that are hiding in the shadow. Maybe you were a very confident child and somewhere along the way you lost all that self-confidence, and you'd like to show up in the world as that confident child again. Well, that confidence is something that might be hiding inside the shadow, okay? So the great way to do this, again, guys, is to utilize a journal. You can utilize a journal, get some shadow work prompts. Start questioning your belief systems. Start asking yourself why I am the way I am. Every time you get a trigger, just ask yourself, where did that come from? Why do I believe this thing to be the way that it is, okay? You can also start digging in a little deeper and go, hey, what are my beliefs about myself? What are my beliefs about life and how I should be in the world? What are my beliefs about money? What are my beliefs about relationships? And then really dig into the core and start to understand, are those actually my beliefs? Or am I carrying somebody else's beliefs and trying to live from their perspective in life instead of going after what I actually want in the world? See, a lot of our programming comes from our childhood and our formative years. So a lot of what you believe and the way you look and see the world might actually be through the lens of, say, your parents. And you're just not necessarily aware that you're viewing the world from that perspective. So when we dig a little deeper into the shadows, we start gaining that self-awareness. We might start to understand that, hey, these aren't actually my beliefs. This isn't something that I actually believe in, but yet our behaviors are where our beliefs show up. So you see how you're showing up in the world. You recognize that goes back to a little bit more of a deeper subconscious programming, but then that recognition that that idea wasn't actually ever mine to begin with. And as you gain that awareness, you start to be able to consciously choose your beliefs, show up the way you would like to show up. Now, this isn't always easy right off the bat, especially at first, because it feels very uncomfortable and it feels very unfamiliar. But the more we do things, obviously, the more they become familiar to us, the more comfort that we're going to feel inside of doing them. Another thing we can start paying attention with regards to the shadow is pay attention to your projections. Everything in the world is a mirror of you. What's going on inside of you, what's your belief systems, the way you see the world, and everything else like that. So when you see people in the world that kind of drive you nuts, that they do certain specific things or something, and it kind of bothers you and it triggers you in a way, start digging into yourself a little bit with regard to those projections. Ask yourself, is it possible that this behavior actually exists somewhere within me? Like, is there something in there that I'm judging in them that I maybe am quietly below the surface judging within myself? In many ways, these projections can help us gain some insights into ourselves and how we actually think and feel about ourselves, maybe below our conscious awareness. Okay, guys. Now, this work can be very intense work, and it's never to be done with the purpose of judging ourselves, of shaming ourselves, or anything like that, guys. It's to gain an understanding of who we are at a deeper level that's maybe below our conscious awareness of the way that we've actually been doing things. Okay, we don't want to shame ourselves. Like I said, we want to love ourselves, offer ourselves kindness and compassion. And as we start to shine a light on some of these things, we start to bring that awareness to the surface, and we can go, oh, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. This is something that I was not necessarily aware that I'm doing, but now that I have an awareness, this is great. Okay, I don't have to do that anymore. I have to be mindful of this when it comes up in my life so that I don't get sucked back into these old patterns of repeated behaviors and these things that are maybe operating just a little bit below my conscious awareness. Another thing that's super important throughout this process, guys, is we need to start learning to get in touch with our feelings and our emotions. We need to stop avoiding them and trying to push them down and push them away and going out of our bodies and into our minds and thinking our way through things, or going to addictive behaviors. You know, this is the drugs, the alcohol, doom scrolling, sex, gambling, whatever it is for you. Okay, we need to start familiarizing ourselves with our emotions and getting comfortable in our emotional states. What does anger feel like to you, or the emotion that you identify as anger? Now, understand that emotions and feelings are two different things. The feeling is what's produced in the body. The emotion is the identity that we give to it. So what does it feel like when I'm anxious? Where does it come on? Do I feel it in my stomach? Do I feel it in my chest, my shoulders, my back, my tension? Where am I holding tension? To familiarize yourself. Again, none of this work is to judge ourselves. This is to gain an understanding of who we are and why we are the way we are, okay? And the better you can get with familiarizing yourself with these emotional states, the better you're going to be able to deal with them. So when something like anger comes on, we can catch ourselves and we can go, oh, okay, I have anger present inside of my body. We give it that space, and we don't get caught into the thought processes that are inevitably going to come up with that specific emotion. We allow ourselves to sit in the emotion, accept it for what it is, welcome it into our body even, and in time it will just pass through. As we learn to sit in the discomfort of our emotions, we ultimately grow, guys. We have to be able to deal with a certain amount of discomfort in order for us to progress, okay? If we're constantly avoiding our emotional states, we're going to struggle, because then we're going to get lost in the thought process of our mind. And our mind is what actually is driving us bananas, because we're trying to avoid the feelings and emotions that they're generating that are going on inside of my body. This also allows you to stop yourself when you're reaching for those addictive behaviors, when you're looking for that easy relief, that cheap dopamine. Stop yourself. What am I avoiding right now? What am I not wanting to feel? What is coming up inside of me right now that I'm trying to get out of having to deal with in eating, or, you know, the addictive behaviors that we've just mentioned beforehand, okay? Stop yourself. Oh, I'm just avoiding trying to feel some sadness inside of myself, and I'm trying to do it by, you know, eating a pizza or whatever it is like that. The more familiar we get with the emotional states, the more we're going to get comfortable in sitting in them. We're going to be able to sit back behind and observe them and not allow our thought processes to come up and start exacerbating the situation where we get stuck again in these cycles of thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling, and we just run around in circles. We have to learn how to sit in some of our emotional states, guys. We can't avoid them, because what ends up happening is if you keep pushing them down, at some point the volcano explodes. And unfortunately, oftentimes when it does explode, it's usually on somebody who never deserved it in the first place. Another thing you can do to help you gain some awareness into yourself, and this one is going to require you to really drop your ego, but you can ask a friend or somebody who's very, very close to you, somebody specifically that you actually trust, that you know can give you an honest answer that's not going to sound like it's very condescending, that you actually trust their opinion. What do you see in me that I don't necessarily see in myself? What's it like to be in my energy? Are there something that you think that I do all the time that I'm not necessarily aware of? Okay, now we need to go very undefensive at this point, guys. But the trick to this too, guys, is if somebody tells you something that you really trust and you ask them and it triggers something in you, there's a real good chance that that exists somewhere within you and you're just refusing to acknowledge it within yourself. Again, guys, this is not to judge ourselves. This is to gain an understanding, because all of a sudden you might have a light switch go on and you're just like, oh my goodness, I never realized I was even doing that the whole time. But with that gained self-awareness now through this process, now we can go about again facilitating changes, making a plan for when it comes up in our lives, and then being mindful about how we act in those situations moving forward. You also might find it very useful to utilize a therapist if that's something that's kind of your gig, or to find yourself a coach, somebody who you know can look at you, that's not really here to judge you, but they're there to kind of help facilitate and help you. These people are definitely trained to help you see things that might be hiding in the shadows, hiding in your blind spots, that might be just a little bit outside of your conscious awareness. So those are some tips that should help you to gain some self-awareness in your life, okay, guys? Again, we don't ever do any of this work as a way to judge ourselves. That's not what gaining self-awareness is about. It's about understanding. It's about looking honestly at ourselves and our lives. And there's parts of ourselves that we're gonna maybe not want to necessarily accept right off the bat. But as we work through them, we work towards integration. It becomes a lot easier to look at those things with a love and kindness and compassion lens. We understand that the programming and some of these things that were triggering us, they were protection mechanisms at times that we utilized to survive. And in many ways, some of these things have kept us alive, and we might not be here without them. But at some point they become maladaptive, and we need to start looking at them and say, hey, this served me at one point in my life, but it's not serving me moving forward, okay? And then we need to just start developing the presence, the mindfulness practices, being in the moment, so that we can recognize these things as they come up. Because when we're unconscious, they're going to go right past us, and we're going to lose our free will to that subconscious programming every time. But when we become present and mindful in our lives, we get ourselves onto the playing field. So when these things start to come up in our lives, we're able to recognize them with our conscious awareness and move in a different direction. Meditation is a great practice for this as well. It helps us to spend some time in silence, the introspection and stuff like that. We can shut out the external world and just kind of go within ourselves, start quietly asking ourselves questions. And then we actually can practice, sitting in emotional states, sitting behind our thoughts, disconnecting from our thought process, from that deep inner consciousness, witness aspect of ourselves that allows those things to just kind of pass through without getting our thought processes stuck on them. The better we can get at keeping the mind out of everything, guys, the better that we're going to be in our lives. So again, all of this work is not done to judge ourselves, to shame ourselves, to look at ourselves and be like, oh my goodness, I'm a terror. No. We don't want to do that. It's to shine a light on some of these things, so we bring them from the unconscious up into our conscious awareness. And at that point, we have a plan, we can take action, we can take steps, and we can move towards changing them. And then we can consciously choose who we'd like to be in the world moving forward. So I hope you found some use out of here, guys. I hope there's been some good little tips and tricks in this video for you. Again, I always say that self-awareness is the key to unlocking the door to change. We can't change until we become aware, but once we have that awareness, there's a responsibility to actually make changes. And we can't make excuses at that point. Once we have the awareness, we have to start taking action, because awareness without action is basically useless. It's the awareness that unlocks the door to change, but the action steps are going to be what kicks the door open towards actual change. Okay, guys? So have a great day. We'll catch y'all next time.